Hello, dear participants. I'm very happy to see you. My name is Gunnar Saiva. I am a national coordinator of the European Union program Erasmus Plus in Kyrgyzstan. And one of the goals of our program is to support reforms in the sector of higher education. And we're implementing this with the support of these workshops, which are aimed at building the capacity of our higher education facilities. In addition, we have a grant component. Every year we have a competition, and then our office provides consultations on what projects you can apply. So this is the first hybrid event where our speakers were with us online and all of the audience is here. So we did it on purpose. You're sitting here because otherwise, if you're sitting online on your computers, you'll be hiding or you'll be running away. So we got you, we caught you. You're here in one group. So we have two wonderful speakers with us today. Why? The reason they're prominent, these are two European experts from the Humboldt University from Deutschland, and they're supporting the process of reforms in the sector of higher education in the European space. You may know that there is a Bologna follow-up group, Bologna expert group, and they're promoting the reform of higher education in the European educational space. So this workshop is the fourth workshop this year, and I'm very happy that this workshop is being conducted on the premises of the Adam University. And today and tomorrow, they provided all of the technical and translation support to us, and we have the premises, we have the entire university team with us. So I want to thank them for that, and I want to give the floor to the president of the Adam University, Ms. Svetlana. Well, thank you so much, and dear colleagues, indeed, I want to greet all of you on behalf of our team, on behalf of the Adam University. So it is incredibly pleasant to see all of you here in our university. And I believe that we need to extend gratitude to the Erasmus Plus program for their office and I want to thank our European colleagues for the wonderful opportunity to talk today about this important topic as a research capacity development. This is one of the most important strategic areas, not only in our system of higher education, but also as of today, this is one of the most important priorities for any educational system. And as Gulnara mentioned, it is highly important for us to we have great partners indeed. These are the representatives of the Humboldt University, if I'm not mistaken. This is the first research university that started this new concept of research universities back in the day. And so this is double pleasure for us. And we'll be really curious to know how they're working today, how they're implementing this today. So hopefully it's going to be very interesting, and we'll be happy to provide all resources that our university has. So I want to wish all of us good work. Thank you. So thank you. Our speakers will be speaking in English. We have interpreters available. They'll be interpreting into Russian and back. So we'll be here for 2 days, half a day, right? We'll be working until 5:30 local time. So the coffee break will be shortened, only 15 minutes, since this is the Ramadan, the fasting month. So now the floor is given to our speakers, Laura Ashilo and Wolfgang Deike.
Okay, well, a very warm welcome from us, from Berlin, to you at Adam University. It's a great pleasure for us to be here and to be doing this workshop with you on research-based learning in higher education. For us, this is also a slightly new setting. We're sitting here in Berlin and you're all in one room, so you have to do a lot of work, but we can't actually work with you. We'll have to do it remotely and through translation. So we're very curious as to how this goes. It's the first step in this hybrid learning format, but hopefully it will be a good experience for all of you. Our aim is to tell you something about how we're doing research-based learning, how we've implemented research-based learning at Humboldt University, and how other European universities are doing it. And we've got a fairly tightly packed program for the next 2 half days. And actually, we've got some homework for you for the half day that you're not with us online as well, but we'll tell you about that later. My name is Wolfgang Deike. I've been at Humboldt University since 2012 as the head of the Bologna lab. And in my previous life, I was a lecturer and senior lecturer of social sciences in England, mostly. And Laura?
Hi, my name is Laura Schilov, and I'm at the Bologna Lab since 2013. And I've been working with teaching personnel at Humboldt University to help them implement research-based learning in their courses. And I'm bringing with me for you some hands-on teaching experience on how teachers can implement research-based learning into their courses. And as a start, we'd like to a little bit get to know you, or at least get to know who's here. And we would like you to show your hands when the question applies to you. So we would like to know, who of you teaches, is a teacher? Oh.
That's almost all of you. And who is active in research? Okay, that's almost all of you again. No.
And who is an administrator? Administrates courses or programs?
There's quite a few. And how many of you are responsible for a course or an entire module in a degree program? Okay, that's not so many. Who is responsible for an entire degree or a degree program as a course leader? Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm also testing my eyesight here. Okay, and who's responsible for an entire faculty or a university? Who's part of the university leadership team? One. Okay, great. So that helps us a little bit to understand who we're working with. So we assume that most of you are active teachers and researchers. So you're lecturing, researching at in your home universities. Okay, then we'll say a little bit about our agenda for today. What we want to do with you during this first day is to give you a working definition of research-based learning and talk a little bit about how research-based learning can be implemented into the curriculum. We do this in 2 shorter sessions, so you get a break in between to catch your breath and clarify anything that you haven't understood. You get a chance to ask us questions and hopefully we can answer them. And then we'll go a little bit into the aspect of curricular design, which I think is what most of you are interested in and here for. Just to start, so what we've understood from our talks with your Erasmus Coordination Office is that your overall goal, or the overall goal of the higher education system, is to strengthen the international visibility of Kyrgyzstan's research and development productivity. So in the long term, you're aiming at increasing your international research output and getting better placements in the higher education rankings in research and teaching. The idea and the reason why we're here today with you is that you want to explore what research-based learning as a concept for designing higher education degrees can do to help you achieve this. And we understand from our prior talks that your current curricula focus mainly still on knowledge transmission, so on traditional teaching and knowledge assessment. So you have exams or essays as the main tool for testing what your students have understood, but you're not yet using other forms of assessment and you're not yet using space for students to actively engage in learning. We also understand that all of you are expected to be research active, but most of you also have a very heavy teaching load, something between 6 and 22 hours a week. 22 hours would be quite a lot by German standards, but 6 to 18 or so is normal. This is what teaching staff at Humboldt University also work with. Just to manage our mutual expectations, we think that research-based learning is actually a good way of enhancing and improving higher education curricula. We think it's necessary. We believe in it. But we must warn you that it will not actually solve all the problems and the resource conflicts that you might have in higher education, so that you don't have enough staff to teach, that your staff don't have enough time to teach and do research, that there isn't enough money to do it well, to have the students in small groups. All these things we understand, and research-based learning is not a miracle wand or a silver bullet that can fix all these problems. But if used sensibly, or if used in a clever way, it can help you lessen some of the impact of these problems or these tensions. So this is what we understand our mission to be today and tomorrow. That over these 2 days, we want to explain to you what we understand research-based learning to be, and how you can implement it in your curricula in such a way that it actually makes your degree programs more active. It engages the students in active learning, and it may help you resolve some of the resource conflicts that you may have. Okay? Then straight into the definition of research-based learning. So when you start to read about research-based learning in the literature, you find that there's a lot of different terms flurrying around. When we started at Humboldt University in 2012, Humboldt University is famously known for the principle of the unity of teaching and research. That was back in 1809, 1810. Now we're a huge university, a modern university with mass courses, mass classes, not just 500 students being taught by 200 professors, as it was in the 19th century, but actually 46,000 students, including PhD students, taught by more or less 2,500 staff. So the ratio has changed a little bit. When we started to speak to professors at Humboldt University about research-based learning, we usually got 2 responses, and I assume that these will be in the room with you. You'll have the same responses, and you'll be able to put yourself into one camp or the other. The first group that we spoke to maybe they can. Master students, if they're exceptionally gifted, they can do research, but bachelor students, no way. It's not possible. The other response that we got, and this is mostly in the humanities or in the social sciences or economics, that is that people said research-based learning, oh, that's an old hat. We already do that. We do it in all of our courses. All of our teaching is based on research. So by definition, all the learning that takes place at Humboldt University is also research-based. Case closed. Obviously, there's a little bit more to research-based learning than that, and it's a little bit more complicated. And we'll probably get back to these 2 questions if you have reservations about students' ability to carry out research, or if you have questions about the link between research and teaching. When you start looking at the literature, you find that there are lots and lots of different terms swirling about. So research-tutored learning, research-based, research-oriented teaching, research-based learning, knowledge production, undergraduate research, inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning. There are a whole lot of different concepts. What they have in common is that they all aim at this idea of linking research and teaching, or trying to restore the link between research and teaching in higher education systems, which, according to some experts, have become a little bit too much like the school system. So focus very much or too much on knowledge transmission. As a starting point for this workshop, we've chosen the work of Mick Healy and Alan Jenkins to British scholars who were the first to try to systematize these different terms and the idea of research-based education in higher education back in 2005. So they said when you look at the literature, the terms that you find most often mentioned is that you have research-led teaching, research-oriented teaching, research-based learning, and research-tutored learning. Those were the terminologies that they identified to be the mainstays of higher education, what people they spoke to came up with when they talked about the link between research and teaching, or what they could find in the curriculum. Now, to fill these terms with a little bit more meaning, research-led teaching is mostly that which we found in the second response from Humboldt University, when people tell us that all of their teaching is based on research, so therefore all the learning is also based on research. This is what Healy and Jenkins mean by research-led learning, research-led teaching. So research-led teaching is where the teacher teaches, is the expert, and transmits knowledge, and the students learn about current research. Research-oriented teaching, as the second most typical form, is where the lecturer or the professor is still the expert, and they're training students to develop their research and inquiry skills and techniques. So the students, for example, could be asked to practice research methods. They could be taught about research methods and then get little exercises where they actually try to apply different types of methods to research question or analyze data or practice questioning techniques. The third form, research tutored, and this raises most queries because the tutor system is not so common in Western Europe, but quite common in England and a little bit in the liberal arts colleges in the United States. Research tutored, according to Healy and Jenkins, is where students engage in discussions about research. So they read an article, they read a scientific paper together, they try to develop a position, they try to question the article, they try to develop questions about the article and questions that follow from the article. And the professor or the lecturer is not actively leading the discussion, but sitting in and maybe steering the discussion or helping them or giving advice when they get stuck, but is not actively teaching. So the students are organizing their learning themselves. And the last most common form they identified then is research-based learning, where students actively undertake research and inquiry. And this is what's supposed to be taking place in the final years of an undergraduate degree in the UK, for example, when students write a bachelor's thesis or dissertation, where they're meant to have their own research topic, their own research question and interest, and they embark on a process of answering that question to the best of their ability in the confines of a 10,000-word bachelor dissertation. And this is research-based learning in the narrower term that we talk about. So that's basically the terminology Healy and Jenkins introduce. And if we're moving on, what's important here for us is the principle. So in the arrow moving up here, you can see that in these different types of research-based education or research-related education, undergraduate research, we're moving from students being an audience, students being relatively passive and being taught by other people, to students becoming active participants in the learning process. They actively do the learning themselves. The second dimension, the horizontal dimension, also marks a shift. On the left side, in the research tutored and research-led brackets, students are discussing other people's research. They learn about research, they engage with research that other people have produced. The emphasis, therefore, is on research content. And on the right-hand side, with research-based and research-oriented learning, the emphasis is more on the research process and research problems. So to make it even simpler, We're moving on the vertical scale from being taught, from students being passive, to active learning, and on the left-hand side, from knowing more or less to doing. And this is the shift that the European Union and European higher education systems have been trying to achieve. In America in 1995, this was called the shift from teaching to learning. That what we want from graduates, that we want from university graduates, is the ability to learn independently and to take charge of their own learning processes so that they can become competent individuals in a professional or a research environment in their later lives. Okay, so accordingly, what Healy and Jenkins believe, or what they tell us, is that all undergraduate students in all higher education institutions should experience learning through and about research and inquiry. In undergraduate research, students learn and are assessed in ways that come as close as possible to the experience of academic staff carrying out their disciplinary research. So while this doesn't define what research-based learning is, we'll come to that in a second, it gives us an idea of what Healy and Jenkins want higher education to do. They see it as an acculturation process, a process of socializing students into becoming junior researchers. So we want, as Humboldt did back in 1809, 1810, we want the students that we teach to become independent researchers in the same way that we are. That's the purpose of higher education. A lot of these skills that they learn here, and for a lot of students who don't enter into research careers, are also useful for other things, but this is mainly about research training. And the important thing here is that Healy and Jenkins talk about undergraduate education and research-based education in higher education. So it's not yet the form. What we've been trying to do at Humboldt University with regards to a sharper and a little bit more German definition, apologies for that in advance, is to implement research-based learning in a particular way. The concept or the definition that I want to introduce here, and then we're coming to the end of the first block of input, is one by Ludwig Huber, who was one of the leading figures in implementing research-based learning and undergraduate research in Germany since the 1970s. So he was one of the pioneers in a mass higher education system trying to reconnect research and teaching. And he provides a definition of research-based learning that we've been trying to use as our model or our modern ideal at Humboldt University. And that is different, I assume, from some of the things that you might be doing or some of the things that you might associate with students doing research. So what Huber wrote back in 2013 is that research-based learning distinguishes itself from other forms of learning by the fact that the students co-shape, experience, and reflect the process of a research project that is directed at gaining research findings relevant for third parties in its substantial phases. Okay, long sentence, and it carries on. What he's saying here is that this is not just about knowledge, but research-based learning must create or should create an experience for students, the opportunity to fully immerse themselves in a research process and reflect the research process, and ideally to complete an entire research cycle from developing a research interest, finding out some initial information, finding a gap in the existing knowledge, defining a research question, carrying out the research, refining it, analyzing the data to producing a research result, the whole circle, ideally in most of its phases. And what he also says here, so it's the process of research, is that research-based learning, as he sees it, should be directed at gaining research findings that are relevant for third parties. So the idea or the difference to traditional learning as we have it in higher education is that students do not produce a piece of assessment that's simply there for the purpose of grading the student's work and will not be read by anybody other than the person marking the piece of research, like an exam paper or a final year dissertation, but that it actually is supposed to be meaningful to others, that it actually, in the ideal scenario, might contribute new knowledge to the discipline or might at least be of interest to other researchers. He doesn't say that students have to complete the entire research cycle, but he says they should complete it in its substantial phases, from the development of the research question and the hypotheses via the choice and application of research methodologies to the examination and presentation of the research findings. And moreover, he says, by researching independently or actively contributing to a larger project. And this is important for you to understand. We'll keep coming back to this throughout the next two sessions, is that we actively define research-based learning as a team project or a group process. So in some academic subjects at some universities, also at Humboldt University, and also still, the academic ideal is pretty much the ideal of the solitary thinker in the ivory tower, the person who has all the time and all the freedom. Students don't, you don't, but in an ideal world, we have all the time and all the freedom to think freely and independently and unfettered. And when we're done thinking, we go out and we present the results of our thinking or research process to others, and then they give us feedback, and then we either know whether we're right or wrong, and the research is already done. We see it as differently. So what we want research-based learning to do is to introduce students into the scientific world, to enable them to learn and to understand that when they're engaged in research, they're responsible for the research process. They must document the research process. They must make decisions about which methodology to apply, which methodology not to use. They're responsible for the consequences of the choices they make, and they're responsible to each other about maybe the mistakes that happen, or the results that go wrong, or the experiments that go wrong, and also for the results that come out at the end. That it's a collective thing. Yeah, and this group learning process for us is key to understanding what research-based learning is about and how we implement it at Humboldt University. Okay, and I'll stop there for the initial round of questions. And could you please also say your name?
Hello. Thank you very much for such a short, quick, and at the same time very insightful overview of research-based learning. Here's my question. You've mentioned that it starts with the undergraduate students, right? At least within the framework of your example. Could you cover the entire undergraduate as a level more? Because we're talking about what? Former high school students, right? Still children. So just how do we try to build their research skills before giving them primary knowledge, what we call the foundation, paradigms, concepts, you know, the whole theoretical basis, including all the different methodologies and techniques, and only then should we proceed with research, right? So could you sort of elaborate more on the whole undergraduate thing? Also, regarding the Humboldt University practice of splitting the courses into research topics, research subjects, and then sort of a hands-on or general subjects. Is that what you meant, or could you please clarify that one as well? Thank you.
Two very good questions and not new questions. This is always the yeah, okay. Okay. So two very good questions. So in practice, the practical answer to this is that actually we found at Humboldt University that our students are capable of doing a lot more than we give them credit for. So we've had research projects with first-year students as participants in research projects that were successful, and for the students taking part in it meant an extremely steep learning curve, because you're absolutely right, and I can assure you that Humboldt University still wants to establish firm disciplinary and subject-based foundations in the students. And the idea, so what we see here with regards to Huber's definition of a free choice of research methodologies and so forth, of course, that requires prior knowledge. They have to have the theoretical basis, they have to have the methodological basis. And we're not saying actually throw them in with research-based learning from the start. You can do that, and it works in some cases. But what we're trying to encourage you to do, and we'll get to that in a lot more detail in the next session, is to actively prepare them more for the stage at which you're expecting them to do independent research. So the idea, to give you an example that we found, I won't say which discipline it is at Humboldt University, but we had one rather large subject where the entire assessment for 2.5 years of their undergraduate degree was exams, exams, exams. There was a pragmatic reason for it. They have lots of students and they're very much calculation based, not to give a hint as to who it might be. And they used exams to test their students. But then, because they're required to, at the end of their degree, to write a bachelor thesis, they expected their students to produce an independent piece of research. The problem being that you don't learn how to do research by doing well in exams. Exams test your knowledge, but they teach you nothing about research processes. They teach you nothing about writing. And I think this is important because our premise at the beginning, if you remember, and the information we were given, is that you want to strengthen the research skills and publication output of your students, your research staff, and the overall higher education system. So you must create opportunities to write. And this cannot be done by simply doing multiple choice exams or calculations, even though calculations are important. So the idea would be in this example to implement some opportunities to practice how to construct a research project earlier on in the curriculum, that need to have opportunities for students to, in little steps, be introduced to what they need to do later on. We'll cover, when Laura presents what we've been doing at Humboldt universities, we'll cover this in some more depth. Okay. Any further questions?
Thank you very much, Dr. Daike. I have another question. On some of your slides, you've mentioned that you conducted surveys or questionnaires, right? So some of the respondents were positive, and some answers weren't very positive, if you will. So my question is, judging by that slide, in Humboldt University, do all your departments Did you conduct the same survey of students, the same research at all your departments of the Humboldt University? And are all faculty members mandated to do that or are capable of conducting research-based learning and helping their students with that? Or is this skill only individual to some of you? So these people who are involved in research-based learning, are they specially trained faculty members, or is it like a generic skill that today all Humboldt University faculty members are supposed to possess as part of the university's philosophy? So thank you very much. I would appreciate the answer.
Yeah, great question. Thanks. We didn't actually conduct a survey with our staff. We spoke to representatives from all departments. What we did was, in a sense, blind research, and Laura is going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We examined all the 156 curricula of our degree programs for the German equivalents of terms like research-based, research-oriented, research-tutored, and so forth. So we looked at the links that we could find, the obvious links, the visible links that we could find in module descriptions between research and teaching, to firstly establish what the scope of the problem was and whether the link between research and teaching at Humboldt University had actually been broken or whether it hasn't. And the good news for us and the good news for Humboldt University was that links between research and teaching are still firmly visible in our undergraduate curricula. So we have research-based learning. They're all required to do an individual piece of research at the end of the undergraduate degree programs. All of our teaching is research-informed or research-led at the beginning. All of our staff are supposed to be research active, and they talk about their individual research to students. Most subjects have active method training. So all of these aspects are covered in a sense, but they're covered to different degrees. And the levels of freedom or the way in which students are led to being able to conduct their own research are very different from discipline to discipline. So, for example, in the natural sciences, when we started, it was very unusual to give students any degree of choice for a bachelor's thesis. So in informatics, for example, or maths, they're given a title or a problem to solve, and that's determined by the professor, by the lecturer, not by the student themselves. So there is very little freedom. And from my point of view, because I'm not a mathematician and I'm not an informatics professor, that's perfectly fine. I think that subject experts know very well, we got this from the first question also, know very well what is required for their students in order to be able to become competent researchers, what kind of foundations need to be laid before they can do that. The second part of your question, I think this is an interesting one, the question of whether all staff are engaged in research-based learning. At Humboldt University, I would say no. Some are more than others, not all of them are. Is research-based learning linked or rooted in the curriculum? Yes, to some degree. I would say that if colleagues were prepared to listen to us or to work with us a little bit more, then research-based learning might actually be a way to make teaching easier and the student learning process smoother than it is at Humboldt University at the moment. So we can talk about some of the pitfalls or some of the problems that we have at Humboldt later on. So the good thing is, or for you, I would like to take the weight that you might be feeling by pressure to reform your higher education systems off your shoulders slightly. Not everything at Humboldt University is picture perfect. We are a big university with our own problems, our own resource struggles. So The short answer is no. To the second part of your question, is it a gift that people have or somehow miraculously develop, or is it something that people receive training in or are learning? The way that we implemented research-based learning, or our version of research-based learning at Humboldt University, actively includes the training of teaching staff. So, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on tomorrow. What we've done is, with research-based learning, we've taken junior researchers, usually at PhD level, or some advanced students who've led research teams and groups for us, and they get training from us, from the Bologna Lab, in research-based learning and didactics. It's like a short crash course in how to change your attitude towards teaching and learning, how to change your expectations of students, and how to change your management of students' learning processes. And this has worked. It's worked for both the teaching staff. Some of the people who were in the Q teams, as we call them, in the HUQ program, are now principal investigators in our excellence clusters. So engaging with teaching, engaging with research-based learning hasn't harmed their research careers, as some people might expect. If you focus too much on teaching, then your research goes down the drain. So this hasn't happened. And it's also been very beneficial for the students. The research that we did conduct was with student participants of the HUQ program. And we looked at how their research competencies developed, how their research interests developed, and how their self-perception, their self-efficacy with regards to research tasks developed. And we found that actually it improved across the board. We did this nationwide for the social sciences as well, because that's where the core of our research team came from, and found the same. So research-based learning, if implemented properly, does work, does help to improve students' research skills. I believe that it also does a lot of other things too, but we haven't had the resources or the time to measure them. Any more questions?
Well, thank you so much. My name is Ilya, Adam University. My question would be, so in your presentations, you also mentioned that one of the main aspects or requirements for education, research-based learning, is an external request or relevance. Like you also said that the relevance should be there and should be assessed somehow. How to ensure this external request, if you will, demand, external request or demand? So is it a state kind of order, or there are some business association organizations that are interested in research, this external demand? So how do you monitor the applicability of research that your students conducted, your researchers conducted, in the work of these organizations?
Again, thank you for the question, Ilya. Very good question. And actually, maybe a misunderstanding. So this is about Huber's definition, where he says that students should engage in a research project that's directed at gaining research findings relevant for third parties. These could be projects that are actually developed by third parties, and there is this idea, yet another term of service-based learning, which could be a type of research-based learning where companies, businesses, or in fact a research group comes to the university with a defined problem and says, actually, we have a problem here that we don't know what the solution might be. Do you have some capable students who can investigate this and maybe help us develop a solution? In a more modern form, so service-based learning is basically working with one client. You could have this as challenge-based learning also, where you have a large group of students coming up with different solutions to a predefined problem. This is not what Huber meant, and this is not what we do at Humboldt University. It's one form, and it's certainly an option to bear in mind if you're thinking about implementing a research-based learning scheme and you have a more applied background for your university. At Humboldt University, if I talk to professors and I mention the word applied, I usually get irritated looks, because what we do is foundational research. So we're not in the business of doing research for businesses, or very rarely are. That said, we have started to engage with other social actors, with other research groups, with external research bodies, and we're actively doing research projects with them. So there are third parties that are interested in our findings. What Huber meant, just to be clear on this, is that he wants the students' research experience, what the students experience, to be different from their experience of writing an exam paper or handing in an essay. When my students hand in an essay to me, they know that it will be read by me. I will grade it, I will give it a mark, and then they know, Wolfgang says this was very good, or this was not so good, or he says, do it better here, do it better there. And maybe if they're very lucky, it will also be read by a second person who's an external examiner, who will then say, Wolfgang was a little bit unfair here, your essay is much better than he says, your mark should go up, or alternatively, he was a bit generous, your mark should go down. So this is the individual experience of your work being assessed and being produced solely for the purpose of you getting a mark and you proving that you've completed your module, completed your course. This is what happens in higher education a lot. What Huber meant is that the research experience, or the experience of the group work of the students, should be such that they understand that what they do is of interest to others. Okay, and now this is a tricky question, and we'll get to that probably tomorrow again. That requires a change in mindset, a change in attitude, both on the part of the students and on the part of the teaching staff. My perspective as a teacher, as an expert, as a researcher is, I know a lot more than my students, and I probably know all of the things that they can come up with. If I ask them a question, I usually know the answer in advance, and I also know whether the answer is correct or not correct, or somewhere in between. And very, very occasionally, I get an answer from the students where I think, actually, this is quite original, could be correct, I'm not sure. They've read something I haven't read yet, so maybe they know more than I do. And then I get nervous as an expert. And what Huber meant here is that really the idea with the research project would be to take students a little bit out of the classroom, where they're just as a group with their individual teacher, and to integrate them into wider research structures, into a scientific community. So the idea would be, for example, if you get undergraduate students to conduct a research project, then to give them an opportunity not just to present the results of their research project or the work in progress to other students from their class, then it would be some form of group work, but actually give them an opportunity to present their research findings or their intermediate findings or their work in progress at a research colloquium in the department, where suddenly there are graduate students sitting there who are 2 steps ahead of them, where there's PhD students sitting there who are 3 steps ahead of them, where there's other researchers sitting there who are maybe 5, 6, 10 steps ahead of them. And they all take an interest in what the students produce because it's relevant to the discipline, it's relevant to the subject. Now, the question is, and it's a mindset thing, really. The question is, how can you actively do that with students who are barely out of school? This was the first question we had, who know very little. What do they have to offer us? What can they tell us possibly that's of interest to us? Okay, one of the ways we try to solve this at Humboldt University is we have a lot of research projects that take part outside of the curriculum. Humboldt University has about 2,500 staff, 550 of them are full professors. All professors are research active, and they also have 2,000 members of staff from master's to PhD or postdoc level who are working in research projects, but with no teaching duties. And we have 70 research institutes based in Berlin around Humboldt University with whom we're affiliated. So our idea was, with the HUQ program, to take aspects of ongoing research projects, third-party funded research projects, real research projects that the academic staff are engaged in. And you all know this, when you're engaged in research, there's 1,000 things, 1,000,000 things you would like to do, but you have a tight schedule, you have a tight time frame, and you need to get your results by X when the funding runs out. So the idea would be to get a tiny group of students, 5, 6 students, to work on an aspect of your research project that you've already abandoned, where you had to make the choice, this looks very interesting, I would love to do this, but I don't have the time, I need to focus on the main thing. And you get the students to focus on whatever not the main thing is, like some kind of side issue, side question, a corner of an archive that's unexplored, an experiment you don't have time to conduct. You get them to focus on that and get them to work on it. If nothing happens, if they don't produce any interesting results, they've still had a research experience, and you can together figure out why they haven't produced any results. If they find out something that's of interest to you, it's directly relevant to your project, you gain something from this experience. And then suddenly it's of interest to your entire research group as well. So that's a long-winded way of saying, actually get them to work in your research in things that you really are interested in, and not just in things that you feel the need to teach them because they need their foundations, but get them involved in real life issues. And then what they do becomes more meaningful to you and also more meaningful to them. And a big spoiler, I'm sorry to have to say this now, one of the key findings when we did our research on research competencies and why students feel, or how students felt that their research interests improved, the main factor for improvement that we noted in students, and this is really banal, but very, very important. The main factor for improvement in students was not how good they were in their A-levels, what grades they got at university, how fast they were in studying. So it wasn't intelligence, it wasn't background, it wasn't building, but it was actually the fact that they said, I felt valued by my teachers. I thought that the people who were leading our research-based learning project were really interested in what I was doing. I felt that they respected me. I felt that I was treated at face level. And it's this, so in a sense, it's the human touch. It's the change in attitude, rather me, the expert, talking down to the students as beginner learners. I'm talking to them as fellow researchers who are in training, yes, but nonetheless on a path that I would like to accompany them on. This is what made the difference in our research findings. This was the defining factor. Okay. Okay, do we have another question? Does that make sense? If it doesn't make sense, then tell me. But it was a very good question to clarify.
All right, dear Wolfgang. So one more question or several questions. Now, normally there is a certain result at the end of a scientific work or a scholarly work, and they recognize, normally it's a publication, right? That is the final outcome. So I want to ask you, when somebody is done with their scholarly work, whether their students work on, so what would be the, let's say, the ultimate outcomes, if you will, like what work products, maybe final products, may they have? So maybe like normal, you simply include them in the team of co-authors, where there are some other, maybe they speak at conferences, or the publications are produced. So the final, the ultimate outcome or final work products, what would that be?
Yeah, a very, very good question. So the publication is the classic thing, and we've got some really esteemed and well-established people at our university. I'm thinking off the top of my head here of Gabriele Metzler, one of our leading historians and the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, who regularly engages, like most of the history department, on co-authored work with their students. And she basically just puts her name last when a student group publishes something. So she promotes them in the process, she encourages them, she helps them find suitable journals to submit their publications to. And then she appears as a co-author, but at the end, so that it's very clear from the order of the authors that she's just the professor who helped this work along the way and not the person who's doing. And I think this is important also because, and Laura might say something about this later on as well, is that when you in the first round, when we were very inexperienced about research-based learning and trying out the concept, we put out a call for PhD students to submit projects to us. For undergraduate students to do research. And PhD students are by definition very clever people, or they're on the way to becoming very smart people. So we had a lot of proposals from people in their first or second year of the PhD degree who thought like, oh, the literature review, always something I needed to do, but didn't really want to do. I don't want to read all these books. Why not take undergraduate students and read those books for me? And they'll do the summary, and I can then integrate it into my PhD. In the first round, we spotted a couple of these examples, and we said, no, you can't do this. So your literature review, your PhD thesis has to be your work. And we then stipulated that when they wanted to lead undergraduate students on a research team, that it needed to be something that had very little to do with the PhD thesis. It could be in the same field, it could be a side aspect, but not something that was to be covered in the thesis, definitely not the literature review. We also reviewed, because we had some undergraduate research projects that were initiated by undergraduate students themselves. So not established researchers, not junior researchers supervising a research team. This is something that most people can get comfortable with or live with, but actually students leading a student project on a research question or a topic that they had identified themselves, where a professor had said, well, actually, this looks from the discipline, this looks feasible, it looks like they can do it, and it will certainly be beneficial, and it fits within our curriculum. And for those kind of projects, we widened the scope a little bit. We said, well, actually, not all of our students are likely to become researchers because we just have too many of them and there aren't enough research posts. But it's important for our students to develop an understanding of what science can and can't do, what research can and can't do, and to become research literate so that they can understand research, they can read research, they can engage with it, they can find fault with it, and they can also help us translate it. So we said that outcomes, we called them the research product at the end, at the end of the project, that they could choose between various different forms. They could have a poster at a student conference. They could have a publication either for a proper scientific journal or for a student research journal, of which there are conference, of which there are some, but not too many. They could have an exhibition. They could make a movie, a film. They could produce any kind of artifact that demonstrated their ability to communicate their progress in a research project. And quite often, because research takes time, as we all know, quite often they weren't able to finish or conclude their research projects within a semester or a year. So we also accepted reports on or presentations on or movies about work in progress. And I think this is something that becomes important when Laura talks about the work that we did at Humboldt University with regards to research design, because quite often when we talk about research, we only see the research that we were able to complete, that we got to the stage of publication that came out. And what we don't see is the mountains and mountains of research projects or research ideas that were started, but never brought to a proper conclusion, that ended up out of time constraints or funding constraints, unfinished somewhere in between. So really, the question is a really good one. How do you assess research work done by students, and how do you make it relevant? How do you make it visible to a wider audience, to the wider public? And for this, you need to create some fora, which is why I think it's a good thing that we have people from so many different higher education institutions in Kyrgyzstan in this room, because there's probably something that you need to set up together to help your students to get experience of speaking at conferences, presenting their work to a wider audience than just the class and the teacher. But thank you for the question. Great question.
Good afternoon, Dr. Wolfgang. I'm so happy, and I'm an English teacher, and I would like to know about some Humboldt University, how we can apply some MBA for PhD. Some information about it. Okay, thank you.
Could you repeat the question, please? I only got bits. Something about PhD and MA?
Yeah, I want to know some information with PhD, how we can apply some documents, University Humboldt. Is it possible for us?
Sorry, I understand something about PhD and documents at Humboldt. The microphone is cutting you off when you speak. Can somebody help us here? If you come a little bit
Меня
closer
слышно,
to...
да? Some questions connect with PhD. Yeah. Some documents for Humboldt University. And is it possible for us?
Yes, I think I understood from the question that you're an English teacher and you want to have some documentation about PhD programs at Humboldt University. We can include we can include some in the notes when we send you the presentation, but basically all of our degree programs you can find online. They're not in English, they're in German mostly, but there are some international PhD programs where the documentation is also in English. So those documents are publicly available and you can find them, but we'll include some in the notes.
Хорошо, спасибо.
Okay, if there aren't any more questions, wie lange?
20 minutes.
If you haven't got any more questions for now, because we'll come back to a lot of these topics in the second part of the presentation, then you'll have a 15 to 20 minutes break now. And maybe use the break because you're sitting there very quietly and attentively listening to exchange your views or your impressions on what you've heard so far. So I assume that a lot of you have a lot of questions, but probably daren't speak up. So exchange your views during the break and then come back and we'll get to the second part and we'll talk a little bit more about linking research and teaching in the curriculum at Humboldt University and what we found or didn't find in some cases. Okay, so thank you very much for now, and we'll see you in around about 20 minutes.
Hello and welcome back.
Dr. Laura, we're good to go.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, then at first, as you can already see, I hope, I wanted to go back to what Wolfgang said and what the last question was from you as audience. What are possible results that the students can get to when doing research-based learning? As Wolfgang already mentioned, we did have a rather small program where the students went through research-based learning courses. And from these courses, we collected all the results that are collectible and showable online. And I just wanted to go quickly and show you what forms are possible. For example, the students published an article in a newspaper and not a newspaper, in a journal, of course. And they did it in English, and here the leading researcher really did an effort to have a team effort, and they all together published this article. This is in fact even in English, and the journal was Transportation Research. Another way to present the results was, for example, to have, as Wolfgang already mentioned, to have films, to make films, because the topic here, for example, was pictures that, visualizations of women in the 70s in the GDR, and they looked at videos. So they obviously at the end of the course made a video essay where they summarized their results, what they learned. We had one team that built a game this also pertains to the topic of the relevant third parties. They were talking about climate change, making climate futures, and wanted to present their results a broader public. So they decided to build a game, like a real board game, and go to all the public events that have climate as a topic. They were here in Berlin on our main Platz square, on our main square, and they're engaged with the people that came by and come to see about climate change. So they had the broader public as a goal, as a target audience. Our classes, courses went to little conferences, as Wolfgang already said, or even bigger conferences, but pertaining to really small topics. The last one we had was capoeira, and the topic is really, really specific, and they went to an international capoeira conference where they presented their results on capoeira. That was just to show you what is possible. There is a lot of formats thinkable, depends on what your topic is, depends on what the students want to do, and where you see the most potential to engage other people with the topic. But to come back to the curricular implementation of research-based learning. Now you should see it. We always call this the matrix. So when we're designing, if you have the chance to design a curriculum, we can look at different aspects, 2 different aspects on what you want to concentrate on. This matrix stems from our colleagues of ours. Wolfgang was involved, and 2 other colleagues when we in the Bologna lab first started with research-based learning at the HU. They looked at the courses at Humboldt University and collected all those courses that had anything with research in their topics, in their titles. And from these courses, they summarized 2 aspects, how to categorize research-based learning and research-oriented teaching. The first focus is on what is the content of the course. Is the content research results, research methods, or the research process? The second focus, the second aspect is how active are the students? Are they more being taught, receptive learning? Are they applying what they have learned, or are they learning by research? Under these headings, they systematized all the courses, and in an ideal world, the students would do all these things. They would content-wise focus on the results, on the methods, and the research process in different points in their student life cycle. And they would also be taught, they would apply their learning, and they would be learning by research. In an ideal world, in the student life cycle, the students are doing things like they are presented research findings. In the next step, they discuss research findings, and after that, they conduct a literature search on a research topic. For the research methods, a similar thing applies. At first, they are taught research methods, then they practice them and discuss pros and cons of a particular method to then apply a chosen method to a given research problem. When we look at the research process, here it's a little bit more complicated because what they need as well, the students, is academic skills. So they need to know what is good academic writing, what is good academic research, what are characteristics and critical points that they have to be aware of. So they are taught academic skills and they are taught about the research process. How does an ideal research process look like? How does maybe a not so ideal research process look like? And then they need to know why. Why did this research process go well? Why did this research process go not so well? What is often not as visual or not as what the students often don't understand is that they are also being taught to plan research processes. And to plan a research process and to discuss research projects, this is something that we found is often not done explicitly, more implicitly. So here we already have learned that this is something that we need to be aware of when we look at the student life cycle. Because what we see more or less as the first class of research-based learning is that the students conduct their own research process. When we now look at the student, one student, doesn't matter which degree he or she is doing, the student would go through the receptive stage. So they are presented research finding and taught research methods before they can discuss these research findings and discuss methods. So they would go in a spiral from the left corner down below to the upper right corner, where they conduct their own research project. And why we are insisting, or not insisting, but what we want to visualize here is that the students need to do all these stages to be able, at the end of their student life cycle, to be able to conduct their own research project. So they have to be instructed in what is a good research finding, what is a good research method. They have to have their own space where they discuss research findings and discuss methods and practice methods. They have to have a space during their student life cycle where they discuss research projects or plan research projects. And then with this knowledge, they can come to the, let's say, upper three quadrants, where they can by themselves conduct a literature research, apply a chosen method, and then conduct their own research project. In a more in a less wide context, research-based learning is all the three quadrants in the upper row. So research-based learning is when the students conduct a literature research, apply a chosen method, and conduct their own research projects in the full cycle. And at HU, normally these three fields come into being when the students have their final thesis. So when they're doing their master's, for example. And our question was, okay, what differentiates these literature search and applying a chosen method from the last field where they conduct their own research? And the thing is that with the left ones, the objective is learning. So the students are learning about the topic. They are learning about research results. They're learning about methods. And the research is used as an educational tool to get them forwards content-wise. The research questions that more often at HU than not is something that they are given and not something that they choose themselves, is here used as a stimulus to further their content-wise education. Whereas on the right-hand side, where the students conduct their own research project, the objective is research. So what the students are finding out is something that is their own research. The research question is to be answered. That's the goal. And as I said, this research process focus is often at the end of their student life cycle. So they need to know all the other things beforehand. Which tells us that research-based learning, if we look at the curriculum, takes time. Because the students need to learn through all the different phases, all the competencies, the knowledge that they need to be able to do research-based learning by themselves independently. And in a curriculum, it does not mean that the students are actively engaged in research all the time, but they should be actively engaged in learning. They should do something actively. And the shift from teaching to learning, Wolfgang already mentioned, we hope to engage the students more in their own learning activities than teaching them. If we think of the curriculum, but also of courses, single courses, we need to create opportunities for students so that they can experience and practice individual aspects of the research cycle, so that they come from the knowing to the doing, and not only knowing about research, but doing individual aspects of it by themselves. It is because research and what is a good research, what is a good result, is oftentimes debatable. Really helpful if they have formative learning opportunities and get feedback instead of having assessed exams, for example, at the end, so that they can learn about their own competencies in research. Am I able to construct a good project? Am I able to do a good literature review? And they need to learn that in an unassessed way so that they can fail and then learn from their failures. Overall, one can say that it's important to create pathways for engaging with research throughout the matrix, throughout the curriculum. As I said, the students are going in a spiral-wise way through the curriculum so that they can build on top of each other all the competencies that they need at the end. Okay. Stop. I'm going to stop, and I'm really curious about your questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I would like to ask the assessment. So you say the research projects done in the group. How you assess the students in the group? Do you have any criteria to evaluate their works?
Yeah, obviously, obviously the criteria for the assessment need to be transparent, and it depends on what the result is going to be. You as a teacher might have competencies that you have to address in your course, for example, and the important thing here is with the students to the students need to know what are you going to assess. And then individual assessment is possible as well as group assessment. In our courses in the program that Wolfgang already talked about, we always prefer group assessment because research-based learning is very much a social activity. It helps if the students are not singular with their own project, but that they are engaged in a group and develop together the project and help each other out with their frustrations. And the criteria are therefore really what you set. You set the criteria. Theoretically speaking, of course, the criteria we want to bring to the foreground in research-based learning are more leaning on the competencies that the students do acquire, research competencies. So have you been able to learn something about what is a good literature review, or is that what you do, or is the plan that you made for your project, is it a good plan? That would be preferable for the criteria, but it depends on what your context is, of course. Was that helpful? Okay.
So perhaps to add to this a little bit more, what we did when we undertook the HUQ program and the group-based research-based learning. So with regards to defining the criteria, for example, of an undergraduate dissertation at Humboldt University, this is up to the subject or the discipline. So the Department for English or the Department of Philosophy defines what they expect their students to do in an undergraduate dissertation, and that's written down and it's there for everybody to see. What's important with the research-based learning that we did in the Bologna lab, which quite often comes before, or it sensibly comes before students are doing an assessed undergraduate dissertation in their own discipline, is that it's formative work. So the important thing would be not to assess the result, because a research project that students are diving into and have a term or a semester to complete may not actually yield perfect results at the end. So you must not assess them on the result, on the outcome of the research project, but rather on their progress in learning, on the process, on their reflections. So if the students choose a wrong research method, or if somebody forgets to clean the lab before they do an important experiment, then I'm not marking them, I'm not giving them a bad grade for a failed experiment, but I want them to reflect on, why did the experiment actually fail? What could you have done differently? What will you do the next time? Clean the lab. Yeah. So this is a really simple example, but something like that. So our attempt was always to engage the student in a reflection of the learning process and think about what they have learned, where the gaps in their knowledge are, whether we're still struggling with the research process. Quite often in my experience, for example, undergraduates are really enthusiastic about research. They want to ask questions like, what's the meaning of life? Or how can I prove that this party will perform better than that party? Or like things that are, if you're a little bit more experienced, scientifically very, very difficult to determine. And this is part of the research process also, that you try to sensitize them towards what you can do with research, what kind of questions you can answer, and which ones you can't answer. So for example, when they go into archives, when they start out with big ambitious plans to interview people, they are very good at identifying people that they want to talk to because they have expert knowledge on something. What they usually don't think about is that these experts might not want to talk to undergraduate students who want to ask them questions and take up valuable time. So you have gatekeeper problems, you have all these kinds of problems. And the idea would be then to get them to think about how they could do it differently the next time around and why it didn't work this time around and what alternative approaches there are. So you're constantly in dialogue with them over the research project. And this is what we mean by formative assessment. And once they've been through that cycle, then they're better prepared to find a research topic for assessed work that's actually manageable and doable within a very short period of time. Or that's the hope.
So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura, for your presentation. Can I just also ask a few questions? Now, you gave us a table with all kinds of methods and techniques or methods. So in that table, what we didn't see was research design, and statistical data, statistical processing. So roughly speaking, I am a doctor myself, so we do not know statistics very well. We're not good at it, just like a design or anything, no. So what I want to say is, so do you pay any attention to this in your, so to start a research, a person should understand at least what a design is, to select that design, qualitative research, quantitative research,
Yeah.
and so on. And also, therefore, the basics of statistics. They should know how to work with statistics. I understand that at the mathematics department, I think they're good at it. But how about the liberal arts, humanities? Do they have any additional courses on statistics or not? So this is my question. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to answer the second question first. It depends, as always, the question is. Has many perspectives. The liberal arts, when they choose a topic in research-based learning where they need statistics, they need to learn it, obviously. More often than not in our program, the humanities chose different kinds of research questions. So they were not as dependent on statistical analysis. But those that use statistical analysis for their question and for their answer, they implemented that into their course schedule because obviously the students need to know some basics. So yeah, it depends on who's doing what, who's answering which questions. So we cannot generalize that everyone at THU, for example, learns statistics and not everyone learns processing of data, for example. That depends on the department, it depends on the teacher, what their goal is, what the competencies are that they want to address. And regarding to what the students should know in their life cycle, then one has to make the space. When we are looking at the curriculum, of course, there needs to be space for the students to look at what is a good research design and to discuss research designs. We have it, you will be sent the presentation as well. And this is in the applied part. The students apply what they have learned by discussing research projects and their research designs and planning research projects and research designs. And it is always helpful. This is something that we might come to tomorrow when we look at what is the role of the teacher. If we look at a single course that is taught by one single person, then this is something that needs to be emphasized because I don't know if that impression I got is correct, that students are not very often prepared for this, to be able to evaluate, is this a good research design or not? And here they need a lot of help from the teachers and from the department overall. And yeah, because as Wolfgang already said in his answer, that to be able to do the final bit of independent research, they need to know what is a manageable research size. What can I do in the months that are given to me to do a master's thesis or a bachelor thesis, which pertains directly to the research designs. And in HU as well, just to bring another example, is this is something that is taught together sometimes with the academic skills. So the students very often have a preliminary course that they are doing in their first semester or first semesters, where they have an introduction to how is research done, and they're sometimes, not always, they learn about research designs, they learn about research questions, and so on. So they have this one course in the first semester or in the first semesters where they theoretically, receptively are being taught about these things. Just an example from HU and how we manage with this. Here, Wolfgang managed to pick it out. You wanted to say something?
Okay, so maybe in addition, I think it's a good question about the training of methods. It was also the first.
Here is another question. Here is
Okay.
another question. So my name is Saraleko Bekbalot. Can you please tell us, have you studied the academic performance of foreign students compared to local domestic students? If yes, what would be some factors that may have an impact on their academic performance? All of us here work with foreign students, not from Kyrgyzstan. So in our research, we realized that a certain number of students had a clinical level of depression. You know, there is a depression scale, and we assessed them, and assistance was provided, and that after that, their performance got better. So, except for depression, anxiety, what will be some other risk factors that you can specify? And have you had such research? Maybe you haven't.
Yeah, I can try to say something about the second question. I wanted to say something about the first question we had about the training of research methods and the foundation, because that was also the first question we got this afternoon. So with undergraduate students in particular, when they come just from school, where do they get the foundations? The important thing to understand is that the foundations are taught in the subject. So in your case with medicine, for example, it would be our medical faculty, Charité, that teaches them the basics of medicine, and also foundation classes in biology, chemistry, physics, physiology, and so forth. And also statistics. And the key thing for undergraduate research, or one of the things that I would often start off with, is the question that you get students to reflect on what kind of question they're asking, what kind of evidence they would need to answer that question, what kind of data they would need to answer that question, and whether they have the methodological skills required to unearth this data, to find it. So that you match what the students would love to do with what they can actually do. And this often is frustrating for students, because then they realize that they're not yet at a stage where they can. But you, as a more experienced medical practitioner probably can. You're much quicker than in identifying where you need to go to find the relevant information, how to retest results, and so forth. So you can show them the steps of getting there, and that can be part of a research-related activity. So not necessarily their own research project, but some activity that leads towards it. So in the bottom row that Laura introduced, this is what we can call the foundations. Here, students are taught the basics that they need to have in order to carry out their own independent work. But you can also maybe play around with some tasks, make them find out, make them realize what they do not yet know and need to know. In the row above, as Laura said, this is where they actually get to practice methods. So you give them predefined tasks, you get them to play around with different methods, you get them to find out why, for example, doing qualitative interviews can't produce results, or is very problematic in producing results that are statistically significant, because you never get the numbers to do it, for example. One of the things that we didn't find, remember the matrix developed as the result of us looking at the existing curricula at Humboldt University, and we only noted down what we could find. We found clusters of all of these activities, research results, research methods, and we found evidence of all students having to produce a written piece of research. What we did indeed not find so much, or only in a few subjects, is classes or modules that explicitly aim to introduce students into planning a research project from scratch to finish. Yeah, so this is something where we discovered a weakness in our own curricula, and something where we would advise that you do this much more explicitly. To the second question about foreign students or international students at Humboldt University, we haven't carried out research on this, but we have carried out over the last 10 years quite a number of research projects with international staff teaching, so visiting lecturers, visiting researchers, taking the lead, or visiting students, international students, in fact, taking the lead in our research projects and conducting them in an international format. So usually using English as the medium of instruction and communication, as we do here now. And the very obvious key problem that you have here, and this I think goes back to what Erasmus National Office told us, your ambition to increase the research profile of research in Kyrgyzstan on an international scale is differences in the level of competency in English. Yeah, or if you're teaching in Kyrgyz or in Russian, then international students may not have the same language abilities as your local students. So lots of things get lost in translation, as they may do now, even though I'm very grateful that we have translators here, just because it goes a little bit too fast and you lose the nuances of what people are talking about, or you have a different understanding of the terminology. So I think language might be a big issue, and then also culture. That you may have very different, depending on where your students come from, you may have a very different approach to or expectation of what your students are supposed to do and what they can and can't do in class. So for example, from a German point of view, students who enter German universities are expected to be extremely self-reliant. They get very little support from the university. They do get support, there is formal support there, but if you want that support, if you want a psychological diagnosis, for example, you might have to ask for it in German, which increases the hurdle in people who are already feeling depressed and are already a bit insecure, actually seeking support. Yeah, and that's something that goes throughout the curriculum, that our students are given an incredible amount of choice in the classes they take. and even the sequence or the order in which they take their classes. But they're also given a huge burden of responsibility, and that's somehow expected to be okay with German students, and it is for most of them. But for international students who come out of an English or American university system, where they're much more taken by the hand and they have advisors that lead them through their program and they're individually tutored, this sometimes feels like drowning. Yeah, and this is something that might be happening to your students, that they just feel it's all too much. They're very young people, they're probably away from home for the first time. So actually, I think you're doing a good thing there if you're looking after them and you're actually giving them counseling, and you can see it in the results that they're doing better. I think we mostly experience this with students who are here for a short term, so Erasmus students, or who are here for a semester or 1 year, that they actually get homesick. But students who come to study here, they usually know what they're letting themselves in for. If you want to do an entire degree in the German higher education system, then they're not, I don't think they're significantly different in their performance from our local students. If anything, they're probably a little bit better because they need to make that big step consciously.
Thank you very much for your answers. Now, research-based learning, we understood the fundamentals of it. Yes, students can and should be involved in research to the best of their ability from the very beginning. How about conducting research as part of their individual subjects or courses? Say, for instance, their spring semester would consist of 5 major classes, right? 5 major subjects. How reasonable would be to assume that every student would engage in some kind of mini research project? If we are to have every single one of them, at some point, they would be turned off if we tell them that they have to conduct a research project on every single of their 5 courses during each semester. That's the first question. Are you apprehensive about perhaps overloading them with research? The second question is, what are the venues for them to conduct that research? Extracurricular, when they go to libraries, online studies, online research of their own? Like, how do you time-wise schedule that into their workload, the research project that they have to do, in addition to all the homework and attending 5 courses per semester?
What you mentioned there is actually at some levels really a problem as well here at Humboldt Universität. Sometimes the students are overwhelmed because they have to do a lot of research projects at the same time. This is why we want to look at the curricular context, so that we don't have the situation that the students are doing 3 research projects at the same time, because that is a lot. And me personally, I don't think that the research can be very valuable if they have to do so many different research projects at one time. An aspect that comes to mind here is that I want to again say that the students, of course, are kind of independent in their research-based learning, but they are not single actors. They are in a group. So I want to emphasize that when we look at research-based learning on a course level, then we have the students as a group do research, so they can share responsibilities. Not everyone needs to do every step of the research by themselves, but they can share in who is doing what, who is good at what, who has already competencies that we need to answer the question. So they won't be as overwhelmed anymore because they have a shared pool of resources. And in if you look again at the curricular context of research-based learning, then what kind of research or what content of research the students are doing depends on how far they are along in their student life cycle. So we can have them in different courses, learn different aspects of research-based research process, research methods, and so on, and spread their learning about research over their whole life cycle as a student, and focus on one or maybe two courses. Let's say the fourth semester where they do research-based learning as a course where that is the content. That would be kind of the ideal way for the students to go through this. And you were asking about the venues where they conduct their research, and that too depends on what research they are doing. English literature students are doing different kind of research than psychologists, for example. So what we have learned from our experiences that we need to give them the time and the space to be able to do their research, whether it's that they have time on their own to spend in a library, or it's a time and a place where the group can meet to develop an interview that they want to post to someone. The teaching staff need to be aware of that the students are instructed in this is your space, this is your research time, use it, these are the things that I want you to do, and you come back with the results, and whenever you need help you come to me. So the venues are more not in spatial, for me not in a spatial sense, but more in a we are giving them the opportunity to learn for themselves what they need and where they need to do it. Does that answer your question, or did you have a different direction?
Nope, all clear. Your answers were exhaustive. So for labs, not in the sense of instrumentation lab, but more like lounges or meeting rooms, are they available in on the campus? So throughout the life cycle of the research project, they themselves assign each other roles, say, research project director, and do they appoint one another as such, or and lesser roles, or and in what status do they graduate after their research project is completed? Say, do you immediately give some kind of a special thesis level to a research project coordinator, one of the 5 or 6 students who were part of this research team? What is the benefit for them? What is the
Yeah.
what is the something tangible that they gain?
Yeah. In our project, there was actually nothing tangible. It's all built on internal motivation. We just assumed that the students are highly motivated to do their own research and to select their own research question and to work on it. And they did not get any extra credits apart from, of course, you have taken the course, and of course, you are getting your transcript of records for this course, and we will we will assign to you the credits and the competencies that you have learned in written form. The roles that they chose, the students who have partaken in research-based learning, they assign by themselves. So they, in an ideal format, they already know, okay, you can do this, I can do this, let's get together and we can share our resources. And mostly, as this is a group process, one cannot say that one was a leader or that one person has done more than the others. They have done different kind of things. And that's why we always vote for research-based learning as a group process where there is kind of no individual assessment at the end. And but the whole group has learned from the process and has answered their questions, their research question. Ich mach aus.
But I think the question about tangible rewards or additional rewards actually is a good one, because this is one way in which you can incentivize students actively taking a leadership part or a leadership role in research-based learning. And in a sense, we have done that. So we provided, when we selected student research projects, we had an open call where students had to apply with proposals for research-based learning projects, and we selected them from a pool of several dozens of students who wanted to do something like this, and they got a student assistantship for a year. So the students initiating the research project, if they were successful, actually got something like a small grant over the period of a year for them to lead a research project. And we had junior PhD researchers leading a research project who got a visiting lectureship as a reward. So it's a way to do it, and it's actually probably a way for you to organize something in your universities. You can also think about research-based learning as a fast track to a PhD. That's common in some undergraduate research schemes in the US, for example, but we haven't done that at Humboldt, and Laura's contradicting me now.
No, not contradicting. I just want to specify when I'm talking about the students, I'm talking about those who are taking part in research-based learning, whereas what you mentioned, Wolfgang, was already part from the teachers, because we had different kind of teachers. We had the student teachers, and we had PhD teachers, and we had teachers who have already who are already academic staff of the university. And of course, the teachers have been rewarded for their work, but the students who take part in research-based learning, they are kind of one group, and no one is singled out.
Now, perhaps Laura said that already, but with regards to the question before, so students have 5 subjects running in parallel, so they need to produce coursework for 5 courses. This is something where we found that it's quite often helpful. At Humboldt University, when we started, we advised 2 or 3 departments who were looking at redesigning their own departmental curricula, or just one particular area of their curriculum with research-based learning in mind. And one of the things that we quite often found is that every lecturer at Humboldt University is an island, is a solitary fighter for him or herself. Every lecturer thinks that they have to provide their students with all the knowledge they need to pass their course or pass their class in front of them. So going back to the question of statistics, if I have a student in my class who says, "But Wolfgang, what is this statistics you talk about? I've never heard of it," then I would feel obliged to give them a crash course in statistics so they can follow my classes. And actually, curricular design, if you do it sensibly, means that you know what the students that you have sitting in front of you already can and can't do. You know what classes they've taken before they come into your class, ideally, if you're in a kind of process of learning. And in order to achieve that, you need to talk to your colleagues, you need to look very closely at how much overlap you need in your curriculum. Repetition isn't bad. Repetition, in fact, is a good thing. But designing a curriculum to make an entire research-based learning degree doesn't mean that you all have to do the same and they all have to do research-based learning and little research projects in all of your classes. By no means. You just need to be clear with your colleagues who does what, where, and when, and to identify room for productive overlaps so that you get continuity and space for repetition, so students have opportunities to learn and learn the same thing again and get better at it. And spaces where you actually say, well, there's too much repetition. We've already done this in year one. We don't need to repeat it in year two. They should learn to walk now, and we take some of the support away from them. So we up the level a little bit. With regards to where and when they do research, this is a tricky question, because we found that the thing that motivates students a lot to engage in research is if they feel they have control over the research topic, if they can do their research project on something that genuinely interests them. And as a teacher, it hurts me, but this might be something that is not what's happening in my class. Yeah? So they might find my class necessary but boring, and they might be really enthusiastic about something my colleague does, and they want to do their research project there. That's something I have to live with. Yeah, and ideally, if you design your curriculum, yeah, you need to create free spaces where students with similar interests can come together and do a group project together, but then they only have to do the one project, not 5 projects in parallel, because that really would be overburdening them, just like we overburden them. And also, I think, last point, then I shut up. So I think if we want the students to do more, if we want them to be actively engaged, one of the prices that we as teachers need to be prepared to pay for it is that we can teach them less. There's only a limited amount of time in the day, even in the day of a student. So if I want them to spend that amount of time doing research, this time is no longer available for teaching. It's no longer available for homework. I need to make space so that they can actually carry out this research activity. And it's laborious, and it's only an approximation of time, but this is why the credit points that we award for student activities also have a workload attached to them, so that we have a rough schedule of how we can calculate how much time students should spend on something we make them do. And usually what we find, and this is unfortunately, this is also something that students learn through research-based learning. If we're into our own research projects, we often work very late at night, we work weekends, we work overtime, and we rarely ever get any credit for it, just because we're burning for the question, for the topic that we're researching. Students also learn this. One of the things that we discovered with our students is that they spend far more time on their research projects than we expected them to. If they were really up for it, if they're really enthusiastic, they would work outside of term time to complete their work. And unfortunately, I have to say it as bluntly as that, that's academic self-exploitation. But also, it's something, if you want to become an academic, if you want to become a researcher, something that you have to get used to somehow.
Wolfgang has given me kind of a introduction to what we want you to think about, because we learned from the courses we have done with the teaching staff that it's most helpful if you can specify research-based learning for your courses or for your institute or for your department. And that's why we want to invite you to, until tomorrow, to think about the question, how does research-based learning, how does research already overlap with what you do anyways? So tomorrow afternoon, around midday, you will have half an hour to talk with your colleagues, because that's, as Wolfgang already mentioned, really important to see where are your colleagues at and what are their ideas, to talk with your colleagues about how you can implement research-based learning in your course, or where has it been already implemented, where kind of the task is already done. When you look as a department administration staff, when you look at your curriculum, for example, where do the students already have a chance to do research, and where is it maybe necessary that they do more research? So we want to invite you to really think specifically about your situation and how research-based learning fits into this, or research overall fits into this. And tomorrow, when we see each other again, I hope that you bring all your ideas and all your challenges with you, so that we can discuss them over the course of the afternoon. We will give the facilitating staff at the Adam University the questions, so that when you come tomorrow to the room, you will have more specific questions that you can think about in a group. And hope to see you all tomorrow morning. No, morning it's for us. For you, it's afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, freshly. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions, Wolfgang.
And thank you from me also. And maybe perhaps a hint, Laura said already that we have half an hour for you discussing things in groups scheduled in the program. I think that the task that we're going to give you is a little bit too big for half an hour. So my suggestion to you, or my request, my friendly, polite request, would be that you get together with colleagues that you're in the room with now. Most of you have said your lecturer, your teaching staff, so it doesn't really matter who you're with, but find yourselves together in small groups of 5, 6, 7, 8 people, and really think about how research and teaching are linked in your curriculum, and exchange ideas amongst each other, so that tomorrow in the half hour you can gather your results and you can formulate questions that you might have for us, or that you might have for the other groups. It's a little group work class. You can either do it this evening over a glass of wine, or tomorrow with your breakfast and your coffee. The main idea is that you get talking and you start to think about how you can make the link between research and teaching stronger in the classes that you're teaching, that you're responsible for. Then thank you very much for your attention. I hope we've answered your questions so far. We've taken notes, and we'll add some information on the points that you've raised with the presentations tomorrow. Thank you.